Hello, Bygone Geek universe, and welcome to your weekly dose of nostalgia. Step away from the stress of today and join me for a deep dive conversation with filmmaker Grant Garry about his upcoming documentary, Meet Me Where I Am. Grant, thank you so much for joining us today on Bygone Geek.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Being this guy who's born and raised in Northeast Ohio, who's just trying to take nostalgia and make people feel connected to one another through their childhood memories, to have, a West Coast filmmaker who's like really making an impact in the world, reach out and be like, hey, I like your content. I'm just like, what? Like, I didn't know it could make it this far in the algorithm. So I was very excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm someone who's all about, human interaction, and I believe like community is very, very important. And so there was just something that spoke to me about your show when I first came across it. It was just like, oh, this is my childhood they're talking about. This feels so right and so fitting.
Yeah, it is. I think that's the most intriguing thing about doing this show is the shared childhood, like you're talking about, that it's just like everybody in a pre-internet era watching VHS tapes, listening to cassettes. Somehow we had this shared universe that we're just now experiencing through being able to share that through this age of social media and instant connectivity. And that is cool, because I agree with you. There's times I watch stuff that I'm like, yeah, that's totally like that guy could have been my neighbor, my brother, my cousin, that you totally feel so connected in that way. Yeah.
You mentioned VHS and cassettes, and I don't know if I'm the only one that has noticed this, but like when we were kids and we'd watch a movie, you'd play it on the VCR. Have you noticed as we've gotten older, when anyone refers to it now, they refer to it as a VHS player?
You are right. Yeah, and I've heard cassette player as well.
Yeah,
I've heard people say cassette player.
And it's true. It was a VHS player, but we all called it a VCR.
We did,
because you could record your favorite program with it. Yeah.
I joke with people all the time. We're the original pirates. We're the reason why that FBI privacy warning even came into fruition, is we just stole everything off of primetime TV. We had more of those just stereotypical Kodak VHS tapes than actual manufactured studio bought VHS tapes.
Oh yeah.
With my mom and dad's handwriting scratched out of like this, we taped over this movie because we didn't watch this one enough. Or times you didn't make the right notes on that label and you're halfway through a movie and it cuts to like, Walter Cronkite giving the most boring news thing. And you're like, wait, you ruined my movie. Yeah. It's crazy.
It always it terrified me as a kid too. I was like, the FBI is going to come after me if I like record like a Disney Channel show right now. I mean, it makes sense, but like it seemed like the punishment didn't fit the crime.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
How did you actually get started in filmmaking, or just the industry? Was filmmaking your first step in the industry, or like how did that come about?
Yeah, I think it was acting more so at first. I started out acting in like community theater. I always liked doing plays and musicals. And as I just grew up, I was doing that. I would try and get involved as much as I could in and outside of school. Mm-hmm. And then I would take film classes, like believe it or not, we had one in 8th grade. We had like a video production class, which was really fun.
Yeah. And that's kind of unheard, because how old are you?
I'm 36.
Okay. Yeah. That's unheard of that era.
Yeah.
I've not heard many people say they had that like back in the 90s. Like that's crazy.
And it was, it was around the time where things like Jackass started to get popular. It was like brand new.
Hi, I'm Johnny Knoxville. Welcome to Jackass.
And so some of my friends were like, oh, let's just go try and do like flips off of benches out in the soccer field, and film that, which would now just be like filmed on somebody's iPhone.
Right.
But we had a whole camera for it. And our teacher let us just have that freedom to be creative, which was amazing.
Yeah.
We weren't like directed or anything. We were very much like, here's the camera, go film this, go film that. And then when I got into high school, we actually had like a video production class where we do like a news program for the school like once a month, and I would kind of host that sometimes, and we would do music videos, we would do like segments, kind of like sketch comedy segments.
Cool.
Which was really fun. There was a group of us, like 5 or 6 of us, that, and most of us actually went on to do film just in our professional life too, which was really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, by the time I got to college, it was like, well, I have to be a film student, right? And then I had this moment where I was like, oh, I'm really liking being in the theater too. So I actually ended up getting my degree in theater arts, and then upon graduating, started working more in like independent films and creating, kind of, because I'm part of that generation too, where it's like, as we got older, it was like very acceptable to create your own content, like produce it and act in it. So I found that to be like very gratifying too, as someone that wanted to tell stories. And yeah, so I mean, I would say there's a huge spectrum of things that I'm very passionate about. And it's all kind of, filmmaking, acting, theater. I love the documentary side of what I'm doing too, because people would ask me, they know me as like a performer. And so people would ask me like, are you in this? And I said, no, I'm not actually, but I'm on the other side of the camera. And I was having these really long form, important conversations with all these people. And that was very meaningful to me as well.
So Grant, I had stumbled across your Instagram after you had commented on some Bygone Geek stuff. And I saw that you were also a singer, and I saw you sing A Whole New World better than Aladdin sang it in the childhood movie that I grew up on.
A whole new world, that's where we'll be.
And I'm like, wait, this guy is a filmmaker, he's an actor, and he can sing this song like that? Like, what can't this man do? Like, my goodness, the pipes on you, man, with such an iconic song. Like, that's a hard one to cover, and you did it, I think, better than the original performer.
Well, thank you. That I really appreciate that. I love singing. Like, that is something that brings me joy. People that know me know that. For years, it was hard for me to even like post something online of me singing. It was always kind of weird. And then I just really leaned into it and started doing it more regularly. And Aladdin was something I grew up with. Absolutely. Like, I very much, like, that character resonated with me. I hope it brings other people joy as much as it brings me joy.
Time to spare. Let me share this whole new world with you.
That might be a good segue actually into your film that's coming out. Well, you just had the premiere, right? Just like a couple weeks ago?
Correct. Yeah, we had the premiere at the Chinese Theater here in Hollywood, which was pretty amazing.
I can't even imagine that. That's super
we
cool.
Were, we were like, it was funny. We had to kind of pinch ourselves. James, my filmmaking partner, he Googled the most famous theater in the world, and the TCL Chinese Theater, formerly Grauman's Chinese Theater, came up, and we were like, wait a minute, our film that we just did, like this small little group of us made, is premiering at the iconic Chinese theater in Hollywood.
I can't even comprehend. Like, what was going through your mind? Like, that had to just be disbelief.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and it was so surreal, and the premiere like far exceeded like what we even thought it was going to be. I mean, it was like, we had a great turnout. I mean, we were getting, it was just a wonderfully, like, profoundly overwhelming experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just trying to take it all in. We did like we had our whole red carpet going into it. People were coming up to us, wanting to talk to us, wanting to take pictures. It was it was wonderful to know, especially after in the lobby. We were trying to make it to our little reception. We did like just a little like VIP reception for our cast and close crew and family, and it was just hard to like get from the lobby to our little venue for that, which was wonderful. Like, it was so nice that it resonated with people. And that's all I wanted it to do, is I wanted people to watch this thing and say, hey, I never thought of it that way, or yes, affirm like that's how they felt about something. And so it was a wonderful experience.
Winner of the Audience Award at Dances with Film, Meet Me Where I Am explores the topic of grief through individual stories of loss, love, and hope. The film aims to normalize grief in our culture and explores how we can actively participate in helping others through grief.
How would I define grief?
I think I'm still trying to figure out that definition.
You hear people say some amazingly insightful things about the topic of grief, and it's just, that trailer is cut very well, and I can tell that you interviewed people in a very human to human way, and to be able to get it to a point where almost like the camera was gone, that you were just having a conversation with somebody about maybe one of the most difficult topics in their life.
But most people were just fine talking about it.
Yeah.
You know, like they're kind of, some of them were kind of come in and they're a little inquisitive at first. And then they realize like, oh my gosh, I'm given a space to talk about something that I feel like I can't talk about that much to other people. And I want to, and these people are giving me this space to do so. This is amazing. At least I thought that. You know, I had studied grief as a subject in college, and it was a profoundly moving experience. And it was just something that I felt like is a very important topic to just like, it's part of us. It's part of our, you know, culture, and it's very human, and we don't talk about it enough. We always kind of shy away from it. And so combining my sort of like education on the subject with some, you know, life experiences as well. When it came time to do the movie, I felt it was appropriate. I was actually approached by a nonprofit organization called the NK Foundation. The founder, her name is Lisa Calls, and her son was shot and killed in a robbery, a botched like robbery, like back in 2018. It was a horrible, horrible thing. He was only 17 years old. Wow. And when they came to me, you know, they didn't really know what they wanted to do. They just knew that they needed to show this grief, like show what grievers go through. Yeah. And that was something that I was like, yeah, no, grief needs to be witnessed. That's a very important thing. And after like a number of meetings, we concluded, you know, with the people, the resources I had just in like film production, but also in, you know, knowing people in the grief space. I said, I think we can make like a full documentary on this. Yeah. And then that's what happened. And what I was very grateful for were the amount of people that when I would approach them to be in the film, how many were just so quick to say yes.
You have Anthony Rapp, Rent, Star Trek Discovery, like on Paramount. Like I've been wanting to watch the new Star Treks. He's in
great
that.
in that.
But I remember him in Adventures in Babysitting. Like, it's just, he's done a lot of like old school movies, like School Ties with Brendan Fraser. Like he's got he's been around for decades.
Here are a couple that people don't often reference when they think of Anthony Rapp. He played the TA in Road Trip.
Oh, you're totally right. I loved Road Trip.
And he was also in the crew, I think the other crew in Twister. But a lot of his scenes got cut, if I remember correctly.
When the trailer first started, it's like I immediately I recognize him. He's been in so many pieces of pop culture that I have watched. So to hear him kind of like, he's so commanding as an actor. So to start your trailer with somebody who's a commanding actor having a hard time finding the words, having a hard time describing grief, is like immediately sets the tone. That like, oh, like this hits everybody regardless of where you are in this world or what your day job is. Like somebody who's always good at words couldn't find the words. Like it was very good.
Thank you. I knew I wanted to ask people that question too. How would you define grief? That I started almost pretty much, I think every interview that way. Because when I started like sort of researching for the film and reading, I kept thinking like, you can't define grief like objectively. It's such a subjective experience. And, you know, I've said this before. If you look it up in a dictionary, it'll just say deep loss, you know, and everyone that's experienced some sort of grief, and because it's such a deeply personal experience, everyone's going to have a different definition for it.
Yes.
And so it was very important for me to ask that question. And then James had the idea, and we did it a few times after you know, a couple of our earlier interviews. He said, why don't you ask them the same question again at the very end, you know, after we've been talking about it for an hour, 2 hours.
Yeah.
And sometimes their definition would stay the same, and many times it would change over the course of having that discussion.
Yeah.
So that was interesting too.
Yeah, I definitely could see that, because I think it is something that once you have a conversation with somebody and those barriers are kind of dropped as the time goes on. Yeah, that was a good choice to do, because I'd be curious to know, how different the response the first time is to what it is the second time, because I'm assuming there's probably some clarity. Just talking for like an hour to 90 minutes, like that not being able to find the words the first time you're asked it, to then realizing, wait, no, I know what this means to me, and I can now say what this means to me.
Right.
Yeah, and I feel like not only with Anthony in the movie, but even with John Farley.
Yeah, grief. Grief's a bitch. Gotta admit.
I can't imagine the type of grief that he experiences, where it's probably on a daily basis that somebody, oh, you're Chris Farley's brother? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's probably almost daily. He re-experiences that grief in a way where nobody knows who other than family, nobody knows who my grandma or my grandfather was that I lost in the past several years.
Right.
I'm not bringing it up all the time. Mm-hmm. So it's like nobody's like, I just couldn't imagine on a regular basis somebody telling me, sorry to hear about your grandma. She was a lovely woman. Like it would take a whole different level of not getting over, but processing that grief continuously for decades. What was that like, interviewing him and hearing what he had to say about loss from such an iconic person who will forever live in comedy history?
Yeah, John, actually, I was just at his house the other night for dinner, and, you know, I was actually friends with John before I knew he was Chris's brother.
Oh, wow.
I met him because I was in a play with John's wife, and I just assumed like, oh, your last name is Farley. I didn't make any connection. And then maybe a month in to knowing them, somebody mentioned it, and I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense now, actually.
Yeah.
Because John is a very wonderfully comedic, outgoing person. Interviewing him he has a sort of a peculiar view on grief. And Jennifer, his wife, really pushed for him to be in that space and tell his story. He says in the film, oddly enough, in the Farley family, we handle grief with comedy. And he talks about, and I hadn't heard this from others so much when I was doing the film, but he said, what always picks me up is like a funny story about Chris, or, one time your brother did this, your brother did that. And also us making jokes in our lives now that would make Chris laugh. And he talks about how Chris is still here with us. And I've told him, I've said, I never met Chris, but I feel like I know him.
Yes.
Because of how you've memorialized him, how you've brought him to life in our just day-to-day interactions. And it's a beautiful thing. And that was an experience making the movie that I didn't think I would have, which was, now I feel like I know all these people that I never crossed paths with.
Because I think weirdly, with a lot of human emotions and difficulties, and grief being one of them, we feel alone in it. We feel like nobody else could experience. Like, I'm not like, nobody could experience this pain. Nobody sees what I'm going through, but that's the human condition. We're all temporary. Like we all have a short period of time that we're here to make an impact and hopefully leave the world a better place. And that, I feel like some people might not, with other topics that are like mental health struggles or addiction struggles, some people can't relate to that because they don't have mental health struggles. But when it comes to grief and when it comes to the sadness that comes from grief, it is everybody. It will, like you, it's something, no matter what, it's just a human condition. And so yeah, I could definitely see your experience of talking to people about this and sharing in those moments and feeling like, wow, I know this person so much more, because now it's on an emotional level. Like you shared open wounds with each other. And now I feel like there's this truth between the two of you that you didn't have when you started the interview. So that makes total sense. And that's cool to hear too, that like you're still having a relationship with John and going to dinner and like being able to experience who he is as a person without a camera, without studio lights, without a sound person, you know, like, I'm sure you've had some great conversations that you probably are like, oh, I wish this was on film, this very moment.
100%. I mean, there's always a story. John always has a story about Chris and about their family, about growing up, you know, and it's funny and it's so funny because John will be the guy, like we'll be out maybe to dinner getting drinks or something, and you look over, you're like, where did John go? And he's in the corner, he's like pulled his shirt up over his head and he's like being some like goofy character, and you're like, that's Chris. Like that's a Farley family like moment. And it's so like beautifully like comedic and harmless, you know, like it's just like harmless fun that he likes to have. And I obviously want to do more projects in my life, and I want people to see the performer that John is too, you know, not just sitting talking about losing someone, but the quality of actor that he is too.
You know, I had a full head of hair when I started this thing like 2 weeks ago. This isn't genetics. This is stress, Dave. This is stress.
And I feel like that's another component of this film, and watching the trailer, is a lot of the experts that you interviewed in here too. I had never heard anybody explain grief in this way.
How long's the person going to be dead? Because if they're going to be dead for a long time, you're going to grieve a long time.
Right. That in its simplest form describes grief better than anybody else. Like when you were saying like, what is the definition of grief? What deep loss or whatever. Like the way he said it is like, that's what should be replaced in the dictionary, is how long will they be gone? That's how long you can be in pain and feel this sadness. Yeah.
There's always for whatever reason, there's always this like rush to gratitude in grief, where it's like, oh, think of how all the good, think of this, think of that. It's like, well, most times people have already thought that, but that doesn't take the pain away. The grief can exist and the gratitude can exist at the same time. And that can go on forever. And Anthony says in the film, he's referencing when he was doing the show Rent on Broadway, and part of they do this big number before intermission called La Vie Boheme, where they're in this cafe and they're, dancing on tables. And he said part of that scene is that we can be dancing on these tables and celebrating love, and at the same time not ignoring the bad stuff, like not ignoring that our friends are sick and dying, and it's all together.
Because that era of just shutting it down, battening down the hatches and just letting it sit there, and the only person that can process it and deal with it is you, is not good. Like it's good things don't come from suffering alone. Like humans are meant to share in the suffering. And then we overcome it together. I feel like that way. And it seems like that is very much the tone of your film, is that let's not sit on this alone. Let's all talk about it. Let's speak it into the universe, and together we can make it through difficult times.
I'm proud to be part of a generation that has said, no, wait a minute. this doesn't just pass. I want to talk about these things because I feel like talking helps.
Right.
And one of the people in the film, Natalie Kazarian, says, she said, I wish there was some sort of like social emotional class for children in school. I mean, there are more so now. But she said, we don't use algebra every day, but we feel feelings every day. And so how do we account for that in everyday life? We're kind of we're not acting like we feel feelings every day all the time.
Right.
The pride that I have, that my love for them is still so present.
Was there somebody that you experienced your grief with that also through the filming of this movie helped you process it differently? Like how did this touch you personally as the director of the movie?
Yeah. Just this past year, I lost my uncle who was very young. Right around that same time, my nephew was born. And so then that goes back to that element of like gratitude and grief exist in that same space.
Right.
And it was like having my new nephew is just like this beautiful, wonderful thing. And my uncle, he was sick. And so he knew he might not be around that much longer. And he had set these like goals for himself, and many of them he achieved, which was a wonderful thing. I mean, he taught me that was like a man that was strong. And so, they always talk about people like they fought and they fought and they fought. Mm-hmm. And one of his goals was he wanted to meet the baby. And so I came in from Los Angeles. My sister came in with the baby from San Francisco, and he was able to meet, my nephew, and just a mere like few days probably after, I think, is when he did pass. And he had told me once, we had a wonderful talk like shortly before he passed, and we talked about everything. And he said he had this very like a pretty, well, it ended up being a very aggressive form of cancer. And he said he didn't want people to feel, he was very like, it was a very beautiful thing. He didn't want people to feel sorry for him. Mm-hmm. He wanted people to live their life. He wanted people to experience everything that everyone else wanted to experience in their lives. And he said, I don't want people to say that I lost my battle to cancer. Mm-hmm. He said, I want people to say he took it down with him. And I mean, when I think about that, it just, every time I think about him saying that, it kind of reminds me of, this might be an odd reference, but in Game of Thrones, when the Hound and the Mountain are fighting at the very end, yes, and he dives into the fire, mm-hmm, and he takes him down with him, going into the very thing that he was afraid of. That's that kind of like power and strength that I saw in my uncle in his last days. And I believe that he went on to a beautiful place. I believe that he transcended to a wonderful place.
This is what it's like, and we sort of don't get it till it happens to us.
It seems like the way that even you feel in the trailer is it hits you emotionally, but then it starts to build and gives you hope and gives you something to look forward to and makes you realize that I don't need to be buried by something that hurts me so much. Like, I can come out of this. And so for you to even capture that in a few minutes of a trailer, I'm very anxious to see the movie in its entirety. At what point are you guys going to release it to the world, to let it out and see what comes back?
That's the big question. It's believe it or not, it's harder than you would think. Yeah. It's currently like in the beginning stages of its festival run. So it's the hope is that it's going to play in a few more festivals between now and the end of the year. We're still waiting to hear back from some. And of course, if you follow the Instagram page, Meet Me Where I Am Film, that's where, we'll be putting all those updates. And then hoping between now and the end of the festival run to secure a distribution deal. I want it to be something that's easily accessible for people. You know, and I said this at the at the premiere too, because David Kessler asked, you know, what can we do? How can we see it? And I said, well, I want it. I don't want it to be something where people have to like make a bunch of new usernames and passwords.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Or like log in and like pay, you know, like, so the hope is that it is easily accessible to people.
Listen here, Netflix, sign a deal right now. This man deserves it. Well, I really appreciate you. One, just even checking out like Bygone Geek stuff, and then reaching out to me, and then just your willingness to be on this show.
Absolutely. And thank you. I mean, I was honored to be on here today. You know, I've listened to many of the episodes where I felt like I was in the room having the conversation, or I knew exactly what you were talking about. And there was like this like longing to like want to be part of the conversation with you. And so like, here we are. So it's a very nice experience to be able to be on and have this conversation with you. And kind of getting back to what we were saying earlier, it's like, especially when it comes to nostalgia, especially when it comes to our childhood, there are things that we want to talk about. And there are things that like, if we just keep them inside, that can maybe hurt a little bit,
right?
You know? And so it's very nice that you've created this space to be able to share a shared childhood.
Thank you for tuning in to another week of Bygone Geek. And until the next time you see us or hear us, be sure to live your life with just a little bit of whimsy. We'll see you guys next week.